Hi fans of high quality entertainment. Now this video is probably going to be a long video, so I apologize. So if you're going to be watching the whole thing, go grab a drink, pause the video, go grab a drink, and then come back and enjoy. I'll wait for you. I guess Jinx doesn't want to watch the video. Here we go. I'm talking about when I was younger, the bands that I loved the most. And some of these groups or artists I would be a fan of for maybe a year or two, and then I lost interest. And other ones, as soon as I was a fan, I've continued being a fan. And I would love your thoughts in the comment section below on some of the bands that you loved growing up, and maybe some you lost interest in, some you've kept an interest in, blah 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 blah. So here we go. I'll try and not talk too much about each one. The Beatles. They are, of course, the first band that I fell in love with. It was in 1964. Yes, I was one of the 1,800 people that saw the Beatles perform live on the Ed Sullivan Show. I remember it like it was 1964, and I've been a fan, of course, ever since. The Monkees, I believe after the Beatles, I tried to get these in chronological order, and that's a big word for me to say. I believe the next band that I really liked a lot was the Monkees, and I bought their, no, I didn't buy, I got their debut album as a birthday present, and that might be actually the first album that I ever owned that was actually mine, and I loved it. But after that, of course, you know, I was just a young kid. I was 58, not even 10, and so I didn't really buy that many albums because I didn't have any money, and so I never bought any more Monkees albums, but I loved a lot of the Monkees songs, and I'm still a fan of their music. And then probably The Who. Once again, I never bought the album. It was my brother that bought it. The Who's Tommy was the first one that I really remember, and I love that album. And I continued being a fan of The Who until their last album with Keith Moon, Who Are You? And after that I lost complete interest in them. But I love all of The Who's music with Keith Moon, although I didn't buy every one of their albums. Next was probably 1969 with Led Zeppelin. Once again, I never bought the album. One of my two brothers bought it. It was Led Zeppelin 2 was the first one I heard. I never heard Led Zeppelin 1 when it was released, but I, saw it in the stores, and I loved it. So I became a fan. And the first album of theirs I actually bought with my own money was Physical Graffiti in 1975. The neighbors are awake. So I've been a fan of Led Zeppelin from 1969 until yesterday and today. Also in 1969, I received, along with Abbey Road at Christmas time, I received Creedence Clearwater Revival's Bayou Country, and I loved it, especially Keep On Chewing, still one of my all-time favorite songs. And I bought Cosmo's Factory. I didn't buy all of their albums though, because once again, I was just like 12, 13, so I didn't really have that much money. But I bought some of their albums, but I have all of their CDs now, the remastered CDs, and they're one of my all-time favorite bands. And then, I was a fan of the Guess Who in, I believe, 1970 when American Woman was released. Actually, sorry. No, maybe it was American Woman, but the first one that I personally owned was Share the Land. And that's when it hit me one day, how back in the day you'd be staring at the vinyl record for hours on end. And it finally dawned on me, they're Canadian. And that kind of gave me a little bit of pride. It's like they're a Canadian band. I had no idea. And I've been a fan of the Guess Who ever since. The last album of theirs I bought, though, was Artificial Paradise. But they're mainly known for their hit songs, like American Woman, No Time, These Eyes, Clap for the Wolfman. But they made superb albums. So they're definitely one of my all-time favorite bands. And Burton Cummings is a really underrated singer. So all of these groups I loved, but it's not like I was a huge fan like I was with the Beatles until I heard Grand Funk Railroad. And I think I started listening to them by borrowing a friend's vinyl record. And thank you, Terry Lloyd, if you're watching this. He's a Facebook friend now. We haven't seen each other in probably since he lent me the Grand Funk albums, and I never returned them. No, I did return them. But he's planning to come back to this area, so it'd be cool in a future video to finally meet again after 30 odd years. And so I loved the Red Album, which was their second album. It's known as the Red Album. Grand Funk Railroad is what it was called. Or Grand Funk, I guess. And I was a big fan of theirs until Shining On, which was just good, I guess. But they kind of sold out and they went really pop, and I totally abandoned them like a true fan would. And just probably about 5 years ago, Mark Farner played here locally and put on a great show, and I got his autograph, got to shake his hand, so that was pretty cool. If you hear a bunch of noise in the background, it's I live in an apartment building and there's neighbors. Looks like they're moving out. Hopefully they take the baby with them. That was a good one. The next band that I really loved a lot was Humble Pie. It started with Rockin' the Fillmore, and then I bought Smoking, which I really loved. Kind of obsessed with it for a few months. And then my brother bought the following album, Eat It, which I even actually bought the remastered version. I still don't really care for it. And the last album of theirs I bought was the one after Eat It, called Thunderbox, which had maybe one good song on it, which was called Thunderbox. But I love early Humble Pie. And the next band that I obsessed over was Uriah Heep. From 1972, I bought the album The Magician's Birthday, which I loved. And then I bought Demons and Wizards, which I believe is actually better than The Magician's Birthday. And after that, I really wanted to get their live album when it came out in 1973. I would see it in the store window, but of course I didn't have the money for it. And I never ever did buy it. And the last album I bought their following albums, which were just okay, and I kind of lost interest in them. The last one I bought was High and Mighty. Then, at Christmas time, I got two albums. I believe the one was Eric Clapton, The Rainbow Concert, which at the time, I love Eric Clapton, most of his music, and with Cream and Blind Faith, but at the time, I was kind of disappointed. It was one of the albums that I received. But the other one, because I'd seen this band on, I believe it was In Concert, and I love bands that are original, kind of wacky, maybe a little bit crazy. And this band was Black Oak, Arkansas. And the album I loved was High and Mighty. And at the time, you know, the term, High and Mighty, I'm thinking of Uriah Heep. High on the Hog. A lot of people were high back then. And the thing is, the term high on the hog, I never got it back in the day. I didn't know it was about smoking drugs or whatever. And so I loved High on the Hog. Their next album, which I bought, was Street Party. And I was really disappointed in that. and I continued buying their albums. I don't know why. And the last one I bought was Live Mother in 1975. X-Rated, the previous studio album before Live Mother, was very good though. It was almost like they were making a comeback. So I loved them from 1973, and I lost interest in them in 1975. We're halfway through. Anybody still watching? Next up, a huge fan to this day of this band, Blue Öyster Cult. The first album of theirs I bought was Secret Treaties, and the first time I heard it, I think I was disappointed in it. And then I started to really love it. And then I bought Tyranny and Mutation, their second album, which I loved instantly. And I also bought their debut album, Blue Öyster Cult, which I thought was kind of weird and boring, and I didn't like it. And of course now it's, along with Secret Treaties, it's my favorite Blue Öyster Cult album. And I loved them up to Fire of Unknown Origin in 1981, which I really did like. But once the Bouchard brothers left the band, I just lost interest in them. But I have their whole, right here, the complete Columbia Albums collection. And Buck Harmout, who I've mentioned more than once, is one of the most underrated guitarists in rock music. Whoa! This next one, probably my second favorite band of all time, Sparks. I saw them on the Midnight Special in 1974, and they're also on In Concert and Don Kirshner's Rock Concert. They're actually on 3 different shows. One was In Concert, Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, and Midnight Special. But it was the Midnight Special show when I first saw them, and I was like in shock. It was like, what the hell is this? This guy's singing in this really high voice. The keyboardist is making these really strange, he's just standing still making these really strange looks at the camera. And I didn't know if I liked it or hated it. So the next day, because I was obsessed with rock music, I bought their album Kimono My House. I played it and I threw it in the garbage. But luckily I picked it back out of the garbage and gave it another chance, and very soon it grew on me like a fungus, and I've been a huge fan of Sparks since 1974. And they're recording a new album right now, which will be released in 2017. Sparks. Basically the brothers Ron and Russell Mael from California, yay. I could go on and on about them, but I won't. Queen, who at one time opened for Sparks back in the day. And Brian May was thinking of joining Sparks at one point. I first heard them in 1973. My one brother had bought their debut album, and I really liked it, especially Keep Yourself Alive. And the first album of theirs I bought was Sheer Heart Attack, which I loved. And so I was a big fan of them until 1980 with The Game, which I loved, by the way, but I just stopped buying their albums. And the only other album of theirs after The Game that I really love is Innuendo from 1991. But overall, they are definitely one of the best rock bands of all time. Rush. I've bought albums of theirs through the years, and then I've sold them, and but they're definitely one of the best bands of all time. It's just, whenever I buy one of their CDs or vinyl albums, I like it and all that, and then I just never listen to it much anymore. The first one I bought was Fly By Night when it actually came out. And that was 1975 that I bought it. And Caress of Steel I bought, I loved it. So, I've bought my share of Rush albums through the years. Then, I'd heard of this guy for years. I remember seeing album covers and thinking, that's cool. And it is Frank Zappa. The very first, I had never heard him ever until 1975, when I bought One Size Fits All, which was in a cutout bin. And I loved it right away. And so I was a huge, huge Frank Zappa fan. I still am a fan, of course. But I was buying all of his albums from 1975 up until 1984. The last one of his I bought was Thingfish, which I thought sucked, and I still do. And I just lost total interest in future albums of his. But before Thingfish, I love most of his music. 4 more to go. Now, some of these aren't bands, they're just people. Lou Reed, I'd always heard the name through the years, but the very first time I heard him was when I bought the album Coney Island Baby, which was also, once again, in a cutout bin. And when I played the very first song from Coney Island Baby, and in the very first line, he sings out of tune, and it was like, I like this guy. It's something about, something about singers with personalities. They don't have to be great singers. I just love them being unique and having personalities, and Lou Reed had a personality for sure. And so I was a huge fan. I bought all of his albums from 1976 to 1992. The last one I bought was Magic and Loss, which I loved. And although the previous album, Songs for Drilla, with John Cale, I never did buy, although I've heard many times it's great. But that span of albums by Lou Reed I love. Elvis Costello, his debut album, I bought My Aim Is True when it came out, and I loved it. And so I was a huge fan of him from 1977 up to 1991. The last one I bought was Mighty Like a Rose, when I kind of lost interest in him. But I'm still a fan of his stuff, obviously. Now this guy, once again, huge fan, I still love his music, Randy Newman. 1977 is when I first bought Little Criminals, which of course contained his huge hit Short People. And I loved that album. The last one I bought was Land of Dreams. So from 1977 to 1983 I bought his albums, and I love that span of albums by him. And finally, you wouldn't believe it, probably, but I was, and still sort of am, a fan, a huge fan, of John Cougar Mellencamp. The first album I bought of his was when Jack and Diane came out. What was that called? I forget the name of it at the moment, sorry. But I bought that, and so from 1982 to 1996, I was buying his albums. The last one I bought was Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, which I thought was just mediocre, and it was like, yeah, you just kind of lost it, I guess. But I really respect his albums from 1982 to like 1995 or so. The Lonesome Jubilee is probably my favorite. That's it. I sort of hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed this video. And I just wish, it's too bad you can't play song samples of music you love, like 30-second song samples. I don't know why you can't, because it's just going to help album sales. Like if a person, I like that song, I'm going to go check it out on iTunes or whatever. But I'm not taking the chance of doing that. So that's it. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and please leave some comments below. Goodbye.